Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. My friends, in the last 24 hours, the nuclear rhetoric has been off the charts. Things that we never thought presidents would say, they are saying once again. And of course, we've been saying it all along. Now, I want to share a very interesting resource with you today. This is an interactive map of 2,000 Cold War era bunkers across Canada. This was put together by a professor at Carleton University who represents the Canadian War Museum. And if you click on any of these points, and it's amazing how many fallout shelters that the government built in secret, mind you, during that period of time. They really thought that the shizzy was going to hit the fizzy. For example, here's one that was built in Rosetown. This is a fallout reporting post, a basement shelter located in the RCMP detachment, equipped with a radiac meter, which is like a Geiger counter, and dosimeters linked by radio and telephone to Saskatoon. So the purpose of this network and these fallout reporting shelters was to gather information from what was going on the ground, because it was thought that, if there was a war between the Soviets and the Americans at the time, there'd be a lot of radiation fallout. So you wanted to kind of map out and bring all this information to filter centers, which would report to provincial centers, which would then report to the federal government by some method of long-range comms. So I find this fascinating that somebody put the work into doing this. And some of these shelters are, real deal built for the purpose of military shelters. Most of them are going to be retrofitted postal offices, like federal postal offices, railway stations, RCMP basements, hospitals, schools, military installations, but they all followed a standard blueprint. So it wasn't just, they found a basement somewhere and they called it a fallout shelter. They all had to fulfill a certain set of standardized criteria. And, there was mortar-filled blocks, cinder blocks. And, you want at least 3 feet of earth between you and any sort of gamma radiation source. As shown here, this is why if you have no other option, the best thing you can do if you have a basement, a lot of places in Canada have basements, not all, but definitely out here in the prairies, everybody's got a basement. Then you want to, if at all possible, if it's not fully under the ground, you want to push sand up against the sidewalls of your house. This is going to somewhat attenuate the gamma radiation. Now, there are many other options for you to consider, if you don't have a basement. One place that I think it would be overlooked would be a parkade. Parkades are not only, typically they're underground for starters, but not only are they underground, usually there's no windows, usually it's heavy duty, steel reinforced, concrete, and built to withstand large amounts of weight, because of course you're parking all these cars on these many levels, so you'd want that to be built very strong. You could also consider things like subways. So if you live in a major metropolitan area, then a subway is probably your best bet. Underground hospitals, I know here in some of the universities in Saskatchewan, they have underground networks of tunnels because it is kind of cold. And this is a way that some buildings work their logistics, is through underground tunnels, hospitals. So you're definitely obviously going to want to do research within your own area with respect to where you could potentially go to if you didn't have your own bunker or fallout shelter. But it's worth knowing where the Cold War era bunker was within your region. Whether it's defunct or not, a lot of these are probably still perfectly usable. Obviously, they're not going to be outfitted with modern amenities, but I'm really surprised at how many of these fallout shelters there were, because you need to understand there wasn't a lot of people in Canada back in 1959, maybe 10 million, probably at best, maybe 15. But even then, for a country this large, and if you look at places like up here in northern Manitoba, I mean, there was more fallout reporting centers than there were people at that time. And I don't know if most of these are probably just, like Hudson's Bay Company, which at the time was one of the companies that actually, preceded the Confederation of Canada in a lot of ways. So, they probably performed a lot of those functions. So a lot of these, they're probably just going to be basements, but it's just amazing at this vast network that I never knew even existed up until today. So go and check that out. I will post a link to it in the description, and I'm also going to post a PDF where the professor from Carleton goes into great depth about the history of these reporting stations and what they were all about. And I'm also taking note of the fact that this was done in secret. So this is something you're going to want to keep in mind, is that it goes back to what we've been saying for the longest time, is that the government has to do these things in secret, not only for national security purposes, but also, let's face it, for continuity of government. Because as much as we might not like the fact that the elites and our government officials are probably going to save themselves, it's kind of like an all-star game. You have to pick somebody to survive, and or somebody to play the game. And of course, they're going to pick themselves. They will deem themselves most essential, although I'm sure that there's definitely consideration for critical infrastructure and people who work in those areas. You're going to want to keep a certain amount of engineers. You're going to want to keep a certain amount of doctors and farmers and people who can, perform those trades that you're going to need to rebuild society. It's important to know, however, that this will be kept in secret from us. And I think that were this to happen today, it wouldn't be different, because you don't want your fallout shelters to be overrun by mobs of people. And as much as we might think, oh, that's so selfish of them, I mean, you got to look at it from a pragmatic point of view. Either a few people of your civilization survive or nobody does, and it just turns into anarchy and lawlessness. So while it would be nice that the government would make a bunker for each and every one of us, we know that that's not really economically feasible. But you can take the initiative upon yourself to know where these fallout shelters are in your community. And like I say, a lot of the times, a simple basement that's reinforced with some sand, you don't have to obviously do it now, but you want to maybe have the capability to do it. So that could just mean having a bunch of sandbags at the ready, or just having sand or some method of reinforcing the side of your house. If you don't have a house, you don't have a basement, just like our good old friends at the New York PSA have indicated, go to the center of a building as far away from the windows as you can. Try to get away from that, but there's a good chance that you're probably a goner if you're within the blast zone. Another interesting app that you might want to consider is called Nuke Map. Okay, this is a map that we've talked about, and actually the communist cameraman, his wife's in labor today, so shout out to them. I hope everything goes well with that. But let's detonate a Tsar bomb here. Let's see what would happen. Let's go to New York, because that's where everybody knows, right? So let's go to New York City. Now, let's see what happens. Okay, well, we're there. All right. Let's see what happens if we detonate the world's largest nuclear bomb that was ever detonated, the Tsar Bomba. Okay, we're going to do an air burst because we're going to minimize radiation. Actually, let's do a surface burst, and that way it will show us the radiation. Oh, radioactive fallout. Okay, let's detonate that again. Okay, so Tsar Bomba, the amount of casualties, if that ever occurred, let's see it, list of casualties here. Let's detonate that again. Okay, how many casualties we got here? Estimated fatalities, 6,320,000 plus 4 million injuries. You're looking at about 10.5 million casualties. not including all of the casualties that you would have from this massive cloud of radioactive fallout. That is one nuclear weapon from one Sarmat missile, from one warhead on a Sarmat missile, okay? So this is serious stuff, and this is an interesting map to give you a visual understanding of, what it would actually be like. Now, in terms of the prospect of this actually happening, we're going to talk about that in more detail in the coming days ahead. We actually had a video plan with the communist cameraman, but he's going to be taking some time off for more important things, as I indicated. But we're going to talk about the difference between strategic and tactical nukes in more detail. So you're going to have to sit tight for that. But for the next couple of weeks, you're probably just going to be seeing this old mug every day, shooting the breeze about current events. But we do have some other videos that we have in the pipe that we haven't released yet that are more blue strip, high quality type stuff that you guys have grown accustomed to over the years. But these two resources, if you combine these two resources together, it will give you a good sense of what you might expect if we entered those sorts of dangerous waters that nobody wants to consider. Now, is it going to happen? That's the question. We're hearing rhetoric now from Biden, who's been saying what we've been saying for some time, in that, yes, we're at the highest risk of nuclear war that we've arguably ever been at. He says since 1962, since the Cuban Missile Crisis, which, if you recall, was the peak. That was the peak of fear and uncertainty and doubt around this particular issue. There was some times in the late 70s and early 80s where we arguably had come closer, and the DEFCON level might have been temporarily more elevated, but that was really the peak. This really does mirror the Cuban Missile Crisis in reverse, okay? Because you have Zelensky talking about, and of course he walked these comments back, he said that you should preemptively nuke Russia. Now, he walked it back, and then they said, it was a poor translation, and what he actually meant was, we need to put sanctions on Russia. So I'm not sure how you go from preemptively nuking a country to, I just meant sanction the country even more. Clearly, that's not working. And it's also out of line with a lot of his other demands and things of that nature. So is it going to happen is the question. Well, it could happen, guys. Where there is smoke, there is fire. You don't spend billions of dollars on these strategic sorts of weapons for no reason. Obviously, you hope you never have to use them. A lot of people think, we're wasting billions of dollars on these nukes and we're never going to use them. But a person who has worked in that industry will tell you that no, nuclear weapons are working every single day that war doesn't break out, and that some people might say, just like the Second Amendment, the nukes are like the Second Amendment for countries, I view it as. If you have two countries that have nukes, there's a good chance that they won't go to war with each other because they know what the end result will be. In the same way that if you have two people who are firearms owners, there's a good chance that they're not going to, get in a gunfight because they know it would be fatal. It would be mad, right? Now, yeah, so definitely go and check that out. In terms of Biden's comments, a lot of people are on the Russian side are saying, this is just propaganda. Well, what I'll say about a lot of those people, I'm not going to mention the channels, but you guys probably know who they are. There's a handful of channels on here who provide the Russian perspective, and most of these guys aren't Russian. What they're saying is that it's propaganda. Now, a lot of these guys have been dead wrong in their predictions. They said that the war would never happen in the first place. They said that it was all bluster and the West was, all full of it, and, Russia was not going to invade. Then they said that Russia was not going to mobilize more troops. And now they're saying that, the nuclear stuff is all just fake. It's all just propaganda by the West. Well, I'll say where there's smoke, there's fire. Russia would not be building the world's biggest nuclear weapons and the most advanced nuclear delivery systems, anti-satellite systems, anti-missile defense systems for no reason. Okay, to think that and especially they've been actually saying, well, not explicitly, Putin or anybody within, actually I shouldn't say anybody, Medvedev has explicitly stated that they will use nuclear weapons if needed, but Putin has not officially, explicitly come out and stated that we're going to nuke anybody or made any sort of conditions. However, he has basically said it more or less. He's implied it in terms of, Russia using all of its capabilities that it can bring to bear. I can't remember exactly what he said. So the threat is real. The threat is there, and it could potentially happen. Now, in terms of, are the Russians losing? Are the Russians in a position where they would need to use nuclear weapons? That is the question. Well, today on Putin's birthday, we see, this is just in Chechnya. So this is just Kadyrov's guys, who's now been promoted to third in command in the Russian military. And they had this massive celebration today. Thousands of troops, were assembled. And these guys all look very well equipped. And these guys are far from the front lines. So the notion that Russia is running out of stuff or, they don't have the capability is foolish. There are just trainloads upon trainloads of military equipment flowing into the 4 occupied territories. So the likelihood of a major Russian offensive being right around the corner is incredibly high. I mean, we pretty much know it's going to happen at this point. It's just a matter of when is it going to happen. Ukrainians have been making some small territorial gains. The problem with that is I do still think that they're being baited into a trap of sorts. The Russians are retreating to lines which are more heavily fortified, easy to fortify, and they're willing to lose a bit of ground because they're thinking about the long game. It's not about watching videos of tanks getting blown up or even these individual battles. It's about the long-term strategy. And that's what they're banking on. They know that, they might lose a bit of ground and territory, equipment, guys right now, but they have a lot of resources at their disposal. I doubt they've even tapped 5% of their military capability thus far. And the proof of that is in the simple fact that Kiev still exists. And I will beat this dead horse every single day. This is not a full-scale real war. If it was, you would not have presidents, prime ministers going to the capital of a country that is in the middle of a war zone. It just would not happen. So we know that there are some unique circumstances to this war, Interestingly, just to briefly talk about other things going on in the world, the U.S. has claimed that if China goes into Taiwan, they are going to fly out the lead chip engineers. This is a part of their strategy. So if China does a blockade on Taiwan, they're going to fly out the guys who make the chips. So I guess that's really what they're worried about, and that's what I've been saying all along. So anyways, there's a lot of stuff moving around here. I'm not fully up to speed with respect to what is going on. It says here, estimates by the U.S. National Security Council project that a Chinese invasion and loss of TSMC, that's the world's biggest chip manufacturer based out of Taiwan, could disrupt the world economy to the tune of $1 trillion. And that's just the semiconductor industry. That's not counting all the trade that you would likely lose with China, which is why we've been continuously stocking up here because we're preparing for everything to just go awry in the not so distant future. I think I talked about why President Zelensky had walked back his threats to nuke Russia. And this, of course, is now being taken as evidence by Russia, Lavrov in particular, that, let me change the screen here because it's messing with our exposure. They're using that as evidence that, okay, this is why we needed to invade Ukraine in the first place, because Zelensky wants to nuke us. Now, Obviously, you might not feel the same way about that, but it's worth knowing that perspective anyways. But Zelensky still does think that that the Russian government is preparing their society for the possible use of nuclear weapons. So, like I say, where there's smoke, there's fire. This is all not nothing. This is not a big nothing burger. We talked yesterday, watch the video I released yesterday where I list off all of the very strange coincidental things that are happening at the same time with respect to the government buying $300 million worth of this anti-radiation medication, which is specifically for the purpose of dealing with a nationwide nuclear attack. This is not for hospitals. This is medication that will be in large demand, especially in places that are, of course, right in the blast zone or in the fallout zone. But just the fact that we're hearing nuclear should be concerning to people. Where there's smoke, there is fire. Now, there was an incident that happened. I don't know a whole lot about it, but you guys, you might want to know about this. A drone has exploded at a Russian military airport, and I believe this was close to Moscow. This was just southwest of Moscow. An explosion occurred at a military air base in Kaluga region located southwest of the Russian capital, and they're quite certain that this flew from somewhere else. Okay, this wasn't a Russian drone, unless it was some sort of test, but somebody texted me about that this morning and had indicated that this might be a serious escalation if they're starting to target that far into Russia. Perhaps this was a sign to the Russians that, hey, we can get this far in without your radar systems noticing. It's hard to say, but if you want more information on that, just Google drone explodes at Russian military airport, and I'm sure you'll find more information. So I think that's really all I wanted to share with you guys for today. Go and check that map out. I will post a link in the comment section below. Make sure you have a contingency plan. We've done a variety of videos on this topic, on hazmat related topics and CBRN related topics, hazmat gear, gas masks, dosimeters, radiation pills, all that kind of stuff you can get at CanadianPreparedness.com. These are the kind of things that you absolutely don't want to be trying to get at the last minute. For starters, most people are ordering this stuff online, so there's a time period that it takes to ship. Now, again, though, you have to prioritize, right? If you have a perfectly good basement, then your primary mission should be stockpiling food, water, and a means of self-defense. Anyways, I've talked long enough. Go check out those links in the comment section below. And for my American viewers, let me know if there is an equivalent interactive map for you. I have a feeling that yours is going to be a lot more detailed than ours, and ours has 2,000 on it. I'm quite certain that there's probably tens of thousands of these types of bunkers in the United States, probably just in the backyards of the all-American preppers of the world. You guys take care, and once again, shout out to the communist cameraman. You brought a new life into the world, and I'm hoping, I'm praying that we're going to be able to give it the future that it deserves. You guys take care, enjoy your weekend, and happy Thanksgiving.